Oh, yeah, Brian Bedonti. Well, here we are. Let's explain where we are. We're in Gowerton, which is near Swansea, and it's on the way to the Mumbles and not the Mumbles, the Gower Peninsula, which is absolutely beautiful. It's stunning. Right? A great location to work. It's a wonderful garden. Got a great summer room over there that the clients put in. But I could show you that, and I could do this as a get some shots together, some clips, and do a video on that. I'm mumbling now. Right, here we are. We're in the garden. I want to talk about Ruby tools, and not just about Ruby, about not blaming the tools and trying to understand porcelain. And certainly, even for me, I have to be humble enough to say I laid porcelain in Germany many years ago. We were working, it was 30 years ago, but it was just a reception area. We was doing a lot of concrete paving in the street paving in Cologne, in Dusseldorf. We were working. That was back in the early 90s. But we did do some porcelain outside a reception area, and I don't think we really even knew what we were doing. We followed the instructions by the German Polier, as they were called those days, which is the supervisor. I think he was having a little bit of a backhander on this particular project that we were working on. Somebody at this, I think it was a dental practice, and they wanted some tiles outside, but they wanted it, took a little bit sort of bit more high spec, I suppose, to the concrete products we were laying in the street, though they look really good. So porcelain, it's a difficult product to work with, and as I said, is that I haven't worked with it much, only the last 4 or 5 years now, 5 years possibly, and it's trending. It's going to be here to stay, and there are going to be guys that are going to be laying the basic patio, and they aren't going to need the type of tools that you need for laying or cutting porcelain, I should say, rather. And they're not going to need them because they're going to use other cutting facilities. They're going to go on this journey, this road to discovery of what is the best blade to actually use. The information is there, but you've got to go looking for the information to find out, like on YouTube, the how-tos and what blades you should be using, how to cut porcelain. Do you need a bridge saw, or do you just get a decent blade? There's some brilliant blades out there that you can put on your grinders, and but you've got to be so careful with them. You've got to understand the difference between a wet cutting blade and a dry cutting blade, okay? I believe that, and this is the thing, we're still learning, I'm still learning, a wet blade you can use to cut dry, but a dry blade you can't use wet. And maybe that depends on the company. If you've got any opinions of that, or if you know something that I don't know, just comment in this video, because we will all learn from it as a community. Well, most importantly, when you're using your bridge saw, is so important to maintain it like every tool. We use that XGT Makita little grinder, and the dust that gets in there is absolutely horrendous. And when we think about the dust, and I've talked about this before, when we think about the amounts of dust that we're processing, and it's getting into those tools, it's also getting in your lungs. So all the equipment that they're using now, the TC125, the 180, all the Ruby wet cut saws, the bridge saws, and they've got the dry cut saws that you can use with. You're limited to what you can actually do with those, but those TK Max, I think 700s, they're really good, and you can cut the little squares with those, and then you can clean them up. Again, cleaning up with those little pads to clean up the edge, take the little bit of fragmentation off. The vanity blades, as I was corrected once on YouTube, the 2-in-1, where you got the face on it, which cleans up the face of your porcelain when you've cut it. Do you want to be cleaning porcelain up once you've cut it once? Well, you don't really, but the likelihood is that your blade that you're using could be getting to the end of its life, okay? And you're using it a little bit too longer than what you should do, and then that's when you have to think about when do you stop, when do you maximize, when do you get the most out of that blade for the money that you've paid for it. So it's identifying that, and also, of course, it's when that blade becomes dangerous. Are you wearing PPE with it as well? It's so important. I've been using some military grade safety glasses, and they work perfectly. You've got to use your mask when you're dry cutting. It's so important. But the thing that I was going to talk about is not blaming your tools. And we had a slight problem with our Ruby a little while ago, and I was blaming it on the Ruby, and I thought the motor was slowing down. But we'd been cutting copious amounts of slate, Brazilian black slate, 3cm. And I don't know how true it is, but certainly what we found, the evidence, what we found was that behind the guard, when you opened up, the build-up of dust was unbelievable. It was almost like a brake pad, and it was starting to slow the blade down. So it's so important at the end of the day, or at the end of every use of your bridge saw, if you're using it, you may feel you've only done a few cuts and you may not think that it's necessary, and that's entirely up to you. But certainly when you've done a fair bit, like we've done a fair bit of cutting today, haven't we? You can say yes, it's fine.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've done loads of cuts, and I appreciate that. But we have done loads of cuts, and what we need to do is clean the guard back and start cleaning some of the dust out. Don't let it build up, because when you allow it to sit, it'll just get harder, okay? It'll just get harder and harder, and that's not good at all. So you need to clean it out on a regular basis. And it's the same when using porcelain, not just with slate. You need to clean your saw off. Every time when we cut a unit, what I tend to do is, and I'll be honest, there are times when we've cut, we believe it was the right size, we've slurried the slab, okay, we've laid it in position, and then we realise that it's not the right cut. And one particular cut I'd done 3 times this week. I made a mistake with it 3 times. I made 3 mistakes, and then we had to put it back onto the cutter to cut it, and basically we had some of that slurry that was on the bottom of the saw on top, and sand and cement, and that was on top of the saw, and that's not a good thing. Should we have washed it off beforehand? Well, of course we should have. But sometimes there's not always the places for you to wash it off, and that wasn't good. Okay, that's just bad practice, and this is what we're discovering as we're going along. But every time when I did that, I washed off the top of the saw. So important that you get rid of all that debris, because it's just going to build up. The saw that you've seen behind me, the DC Expert, is a fantastic saw. You can cut in the length, and we got the table saw alongside it. And certainly what we find with it is that it's more than man enough for the job. There's no ifs or buts about it. It's more than man enough for the job that it's actually doing. But we still got to look after it. We still need to maintain it. And you know, if we look at the lead, when we check the lead, make sure the lead, when you're pulling that lead in and out all the time, if you've got a 110 and you're connected to that transformer box or dropper, whatever you want to call it, is that I was watching Roger Bisbee the other day on Skill Builder, and he was explaining that these 110 transformer boxes are they're not designed to run more than 15 minutes. I didn't even know that, and if that is true, and to be fair to Roger, he's got a huge amount of integrity, and if that is the case, we shouldn't be running any longer than that. And that's the other thing, what we got to think of. It's quick and easy to blame the saw when the dropper starts cutting out. If it does drop out, how new is the dropper that we're actually using? You know, how can we gauge what's going on with our saw when we're using another component to it that is probably older than the saw itself? So we got to look at that. And the other thing, when you're pulling those plugs out, there's 110 plugs out all the time, right? Some people, they do tend to pull on the cables. It's almost like the same as when you put a cable on a trailer, you're pulling, you're tugging away at it, and the leads start coming loose. So check all those sorts of things out. It's so important. I don't want to drone on at the moment, but it's so important that we bring these to your attention. The other thing, of course, that when you're using that table saw and you're using the little saw, the attachment on the side, that what you don't want is you don't want your saw and your table in that sort of situation where when you put your slab on, you've got a void in the middle. So you've got to make sure that table you're using, it's got 3 adjusting heights, then it's got the little feet at the bottom. You can adjust the feet so you can get it nice and flat. And what we discovered the other day when we put a tile, a slab, a unit on top of the saw, we had a hollow underneath, and when we were holding it in position when we was cutting, we were putting pressure on that. With the combined tension that is caused when you're cutting porcelain, it snapped, and that's not good at all. So got to make sure that each day, if you've moved the saw around as you're moving on your project, that you've got to make sure that table is nice and flat all the way across. The other things that we were actually talking about, what we were talking about was with the maintenance, we were making sure that we cleaned it down. The saw was flat.
Blade was on the right way.
The blade. I've done it several times. That you've got to make sure that the blade is on the right way round. It may sound obvious to some, and if it is obvious to you, well done, fantastic. I'm glad that you're on track. But for some of us who aren't so clever like you guys, is that you've got to make sure that those blades are on the right way. And what they normally have got is they'll have a blade, an arrow, and the arrow will show you the direction of the blade, how it should be. So just check that out and think about it when you're putting it on. Yeah, and the other thing we were talking about, that's right, so we're talking about the flange, and the flange that holds the blade in position is, in this case, it's a galvanized flange, and you can over tighten on it. Those blades won't come off because it's a left-handed thread, so don't worry about that. It just needs to be hand tight. Don't over tighten it because the cast actually starts changing shape because of the tension that you're causing on the face of it, and then eventually it won't tighten up any further. So actually think about that. The other little saw that we've been using is the TC125, and absolutely fantastic saw. You can do miters on it. The distance it's been cutting is absolutely been incredible. I mean, mind blowing the distance that little track saw, because you sit it on a track and it cuts from A to B. So when you've overlaid, you want to get a nice straight edge. I mean, it makes a massive difference in appearance to the job and the quality of your cuts that you're actually doing. So the TC125 is brilliant. It comes with a track system, and it's got some little suction cups that hold it in position. Once you march your line from A to B, you've got your track set in. And remember, the edge of the track is not where the cut's going to be. I think it's about 35 mil. So you've got to set it back in accordance with that. And what I always find is that when your porcelain is bedded in, okay, and you cut through the little TC125, touch wood, that it doesn't crack on the side that you don't want it to crack through tension. And what I tend to do is I just go through with a couple of passes, maybe about 3 passes. I wouldn't necessarily cut through all in one go. A lot of people say that good porcelain, you can cut through from A to B in one go, but I think even with some of the good porcelain, that if you're cutting through the complete depth right to the very end, there is the likelihood that it could crack off. So best practice is sometimes to drop it in at the start and at the far end, and making sure you've cut so if any tension, it doesn't split off either side. Because it can become expensive, not just because the cost of the slab, but the cost to use another slab and to relay and more muck and more slurry and so on. So you have to think about that. But the TC125 is a great little saw, but there is another one called the 180, which is a bigger motor. So that will take the test without a doubt. But that little TC125 on here, we've cut literally about 10 meter lengths in one go. So we just moved the track saw on, obviously. We got our marks down, but remembering that when you put your marks down, ensure you use the string line or a chalk line, and you've got those positions so that you know that when you move your track on, you are in the correct position. And I tell you what, it's made a massive difference when we stood back and looked how straight it was and showed our customer, and we've got it parallel to the outside wall or to the conservatory from where we're cutting from. It looked absolutely spot on, so it made a massive difference to the job. And do you know the good thing about it is when you turn up with this sort of kit, and that's why the industry's changed. You've got that bridge saw, you've got the TC125, you've got those little grinders, you've got that little Makita grinder, which wasn't cheap at all. But if you're using porcelain and you've got cuts to do around those manholes, around those downpipes, you have to make sure that you've got the right kit and you've got the right blades. And there's some really good blades out there. We've been using the Ruby, but of course, if you go online, you'll be able to find Elite Stone Tools. They do a fantastic little blade and the big blade for those machines as well, and they do last. The other thing, what we think about when we look at blades is, and something I learned the other day, is that with some of the highly manufactured blades, and certainly like this is the little hard enduro Ruby blade. This is the TVA Super Pro. there's good balance in the diamond, what they're actually putting in this end of this blade. There's a good balance. And what happens sometimes is that when there's not good balance in a blade, it'll actually have a tendency to cut on one side more than the other side. And then the balance starts, the blade starts going out of shape and starts distorting because it's too heavy on one side. Not in weight, but in not the correct balance between the diamond bits they put in the blade, if that makes sense. So lots to consider when using cutting porcelain. So that's about it. If you need any advice, I don't know how long this video went on for and how long I droned on for, but if you need any advice, just go to the website, info@greentoplandscapes.co.uk, or you can drop us an email, info@greentoplandscapes.co.uk. Or better still, you can give me a ring on 07795 595 994. We're going to get on with this job now, and I got to admit, I'm enjoying it. So see you soon. Have a great day. And it looks like this hot weather's over. The rain's coming in. See you soon. Bye.